Hi all, a warm welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are going to learn how to integrate ChatGPT with Visual Studio Code Editor. It's really going to be an interesting video, so stay tuned till the end of the video to learn the steps involved in order to integrate ChatGPT into the Visual Studio Code Editor. So let's get into the Visual Studio Code Editor right away. And here you can see that I have launched my Visual Studio Code Editor. And on the left hand side you can see the options to look out for an extensions tab. So once you click on the extensions tab, you will have the option to search the extensions that you want to add into the Visual Studio Code Editor. So most of you might be working on the Visual Studio Code Editor, so you might be knowing how to add an extension into the Visual Studio Code Editor. So it's more like a plugin. It's a tool-based plugin space where we can search for the plugins from the marketplace, and we can add that plugins into the Visual Studio Code Editor. So I repeat again. So on the left hand side you can find extensions tab. So once you click on the extensions tab, you will be having a search field where you will have the option to type down the name of the extension that you want to add into the Visual Studio Code Editor. So right now let's go ahead and search for a specific the plugin or an extension called Code GPT. So you can see that I have written Code space GPT because there are multiple Code GPTs are available. So what this Code GPT plugin is all about is nothing but a tool which helps us to connect to the ChatGPT, and sitting from the Visual Studio Code Editor itself, we can question the ChatGPT and we can get the response from the ChatGPT, or we can ask the ChatGPT to evaluate our code, and we can ask the ChatGPT to help us in explaining the code that we have written. So everything that we can do within the window of Visual Studio Code Editor without shuttling between the portal of the ChatGPT in the browser and then coming back to the Visual Studio Code Editor. So that action can be avoided if we have this plugin installed into the Visual Studio Code Editor directly. So as I said, your search keyword should be on Code space GPT, and the very first one that you get here is Code GPT. But you can see that there are multiple the plugins are also available, but I'm specific to using the Code GPT tool. So once you click on the Code GPT plugin, you can just click on install option, and this will install the Code GPT extension into the Visual Studio Code Editor. So now on the left hand side you can notice that a new option is added, and that is called as Code GPT Chat. So what it means is, so right now we have added the Code GPT plugin, or to be more precise, it's called as an extension which got added into our Visual Studio Code Editor. So there are multiple other extensions you can see on the left hand side which I have added earlier to my project work. So if you see that there is an extension called Thunder Client. So there are multiple other extensions which I have installed within this Visual Studio Code Editor. So in that category, if you can observe that there is a presence of one more extension called Code GPT Chat. This one is appearing right now here because just now I've installed this plugin from the Visual Studio Code Editor. So once this is installed, now what you can do is you can just click on this Code GPT Chat. So now what it says is you'll be having a launch screen of the Code GPT like this. So you can have the code to be written here and on the left hand side you can have your Code GPT activated like this. So just click on this icon, and this will launch the Code GPT screen. So here you can ask the question to the Code GPT, meaning is we are asking the question to the Chat GPT. That's what it means, because this is going to be connected to the Chat GPT. And how do we connect to the Chat GPT? I will give you the steps right away. So first let's go ahead and ask some questions to the Chat GPT. Hi, please explain me on the topic called let's say collections in Java. So this is a question that I've posted to the ChatGPT sitting from the Visual Studio Code editor itself. So I haven't shuttled between any browsers. So right away from the ChatGPT, I'm raising this question. If you notice, we are getting a response which is more of erroneous response. It says, hey, listen, I'm unable to connect to the ChatGPT server. The reason is you haven't integrated the API key with the Code GPT, where it can straight away connect to the ChatGPT to get the response for the question that you've asked for. So ultimately, what happens is it's more like it is like creating a login option, right? So we need to log into a specific portal so that you will be gaining an access to that. Similarly here, in order to access the ChatGPT from the Code GPT plugin, we need to activate the ChatGPT within the Code GPT with the help of API key. So that's what they are referring here. OpenAI API response was error, which is 401, incorrect API key provided. So what it means is there is no specific key, right key that you have offered here in order to connect to the ChatGPT. So once after you install the Code GPT extension, the immediate step is we need to get the API key in order to get integrate that API key within this Code GPT, so that the Code GPT extension can all the way go to the ChatGPT server, taking your queries and getting the response and displaying the response right on the screen itself within the Visual Studio Code editor. So how do we get the API key? So that's another question that we have. So what we are going to do is we are going to go back to our browser. So if you notice, I've already launched an URL called platform.openai.com. So platform.openai.com is an official portal of OpenAI. You know what OpenAI is. It's the specific vendor who maintains the ChatGPT platform. So platform.openai.com/overview. If you look at that overview page, it would appear like this. So you can have some learning out of this. But the main thing is we need to go and get the API key. So from here where you will be able to access the API key so that API key can be furnished within this Code GPT. But listen, in order to get the API key, we need to first register within this OpenAI. But I already have an account. I own an account with the ChatGPT. So with that credential, I'll be able to log in straight away with this platform.openai. So if you notice here, we have the option called login. So just click on the login button and then you'll be redirected to the login screen, where you need to offer your the email ID and the password, which is typically the credentials that we need to pass on. So what it redirects is it's more of an authentication page of an OpenAI. So provide your credentials. If you haven't logged in, then if you haven't registered, please go ahead and register first. So you have the option to sign up, and or you can also use the Google account or Microsoft account to log into this OpenAI. But I have my own credential that I've created exclusively for this ChatGPT interaction. So I offered my email address, and I'm continuing with my password, and with that I'll be able to log into the platform.openai, and you can see right now it's my personal account. Okay, so this is the account that I've logged in with, skilled@sabaribalaji.com. And once you click on the menu up here, you'll be having an option to look for view API keys. So this is my own API key which I can generate in order to provide that API key to the external tool, so that external tool can connect to the ChatGPT via my account. So it's more like a single sign-on option that we all use day in and day out, right? So similar to that, we are going to offer an API key which is associated with this account. So let's go ahead and click on this view API key. I again repeat. So once you go to the platform.openai.com, you need to log into the openai.com platform account, and post that you'll be having the option to see a menu on the personal option, where you'll be having the menu called View API Key. Just click on the View API Key. It'll redirect you to the API Keys page, and there you can find that there is a Create New Secret Key option is mentioned here. So just click on this Create New Secret Key button. So once you click on the Create New Secret Key button, it'll prompt for a name for the secret key. So the name that you're going to offer is going to be optional, so you can give any name, but that is not going to impact in any way on your creation of a secret key here, right? So I repeat again. So once you click on that View API Keys, you will be on the API Keys page. You can notice that I already have my API key generated, but this key is not offered into this Code GPT, right? So just now we have installed, so we need to offer the API key. But anyways, this is a one-time attempt, so we cannot go ahead and copy this key. So at the time of creation of the key alone, we can copy that and keep it safer somewhere else. So later, once after the key got generated, and if you forgot to copy it, then probably you'll not be able to get that key again. So let's go ahead and create a new secret key again, and give a name called ChatGPT-API key. Let's say I give a numbering order like ChatGPT API key -1. Remember that this is just a name, so typically it's optional, so you can give any name, and just click on Create Secret Key. This will create a random key numbering like this, right? So please save the secret key somewhere safe and accessible. For security reasons, you won't be able to view it again. So that's what I said earlier, right? It's quite it's quite impossible to retrieve this key again. So initially you just click on this copy button, and it will help you to copy the key that's been generated, and you click on done, and that's all. So now what we have is, actually we have two key generated here, and both the keys are available, but the newly created key ChatGPT API key 1 is the key that I'm going to use in order to connect to the ChatGPT from the Code GPT plugin. So what we have to do right now, how do we append this key? How do we append this key into this Code GPT? So that we need to look forward, right? So what we can do is, we have the option called settings. So from the Code GPT, you have an option called settings. So just click on that settings. Just click on extension settings. It will take you to the extension settings of that particular Code GPT. Okay, so here you can notice that Code GPT API key. To enter your API key, press Command Shift P. So the option is Command Shift P, and here you'll be having an option called Set API Key. Okay, you can type that as well. Set API Key. Okay, so Code GPT is offering one of the option called Set API Key. I repeat once again. Once after you have installed your Code GPT, let's say for example you don't have any screens appearing here. So what you can do is, you can go all the way to the extensions. Just click on the installed Code GPT again. It will launch the home screen of that particular extension, where you have the option of settings, extension settings. This is one way. Another way is, you can use the shortcut command also to launch the extension settings, but I want to go specific to the Code GPT. So I just stepped into the Code GPT's extension. From there, I'll have the option to select the extension settings option, and all the way you have the option to append your API key. So what they are saying is, you just go for the shortcut key of Command Shift P. If it's a Windows environment, right now I'm using a Mac operating system, so if it's going to be a Windows environment, you'll be having Control Shift P option, but here I'm using Command Shift P. So Command Shift P, and type in Set API and Set API Key. Once you click on the Set API Key option, you can notice that there's a text field appearing where you can just place your key that you have copied just now. So I've copied the API key which I generated from my account from the platform.openai, right? So from here you can copy the key and paste it up here and press enter. Press enter to confirm your input, or you escape to cancel. If in case you don't want to bind this API key here, you just press cancel to escape it, or just click enter. So I'm right now pressing enter. So by this way, API key is saved into this Code GPT, right? So right now what we are going to see up here is we are going to check if this key is successfully binded or not. So what we are going to do right now is just click on this Code GPT option, and then go and say hi and see if it's giving any response. So right now it's not giving any response, still it is saying 401. The main reason would be this Visual Studio Code editor need to be reloaded, okay, because we have binded the API key, right? So we need to go ahead and reload the Visual Studio Code editor. So for that, what you can do is, again, I'm just pressing Command Shift P, and in the Command Shift P you have the option called reload, okay, developer reload window. Just click on that developer reload window. This will reload your entire Visual Studio Code editor. So once after the reload is done, now let's see hi as a communication initiations that I'm making with ChatGPT. Okay, let's see what it's going to respond. So if you look at it, it says, hello, how can I assist you today? So what happens right now is we have already binded the API key with this Code GPT, and the Code GPT is all the way using that API key as a reference or a credentials in order to connect to the ChatGPT of my account, right? So if you go to the chat.openai.com, so right now you can see that I've logged in with my credentials, okay, so which is skilled@sabribalaji.com. already I've logged in with the openai.com, which is platform, and here you can see that new chat GPT window is also having the option to log in with the same account. So by clicking on this new chat, we can actually enable the communication with the ChatGPT. But right now that's not happening because I'm having a Code GPT plugin integrated within the Visual Studio Code editor itself. So I don't need to go to the chat.openai screen and then have a conversation, but rather I can just sit on the Code GPT tool itself. So here you can just raise your conversation with the Code GPT, which will all the way go to the Chat GPT server, okay, behind the scene, with the help of the API key that we have binded with the Code GPT plugin or an extension. So what I'm going to do right now is, let's keep this aside. I'm not going to come to this particular Code GPT right now. So let's go to the Explorer, create a new file. Let's name that as let's say reverse name.js. So I have a file called reverse name.js, and in this reverse name.js file, I'm going to place a specific code where I've already generated and kept it intact. So what this is going to have is, it's a JavaScript file, and I've written a function called reverse string, which takes an argument as an input and it does a job of reversing the given string. So as you can notice, when I'm calling this function reverse string, I'm forwarding a string called Malayalam, where this Malayalam will be forwarded as an argument to this str variable, and this str variable will be splitted, and it will take individual character out, and then it calls the reverse function within the a split string variable, and then it's further reversing every character one by one. It's an array of character that it's going to produce, and that array is going to be reversed, and the reversed array is going to be joined again together into a string and storing it in another variable called join array, and that join array is getting returned. So this is what, anyways, it's a pretty simple code, nothing much complex here. It's all about reversing a given string, and the result of the string is going to be, reverse string is going to be printed here with the help of console.log. So by launching the terminal screen, we'll be able to see the result as well. So what we are going to do right now is, I'm going to make use of this Code GPT, and I'm going to select all these functions. So select all these functions and raise a question stating, please explain me the code that is selected, right? So please explain me the code that is selected. So as they are giving some options here, explain the selected code, identify any issues in selected code, or create a unit test case for the code that I've written. So even that is possible as a question that you can ask with the ChatGPT, so that the ChatGPT can quickly look out for the code that you have written here sitting from the Visual Studio Code editor itself. So just click on send and let's wait for the response. Pretty cool. So it can able to read the code that you have already written. So what it says is the selected code demonstrates a JavaScript function called reverse string that accepts a string as an argument. Yes, of course, we are forwarding a string as an argument, and then returns the reversed version of the string. So the code works by first splitting the input string into an array. That's what is happening. The split method is used to split the string into an array of characters, and then the reverse method is called on top of the array of variable, which will help us to reverse the entire array. After reversing the array, finally, the join method is used to merge the reversed array back into a string. So whatever I explained is what this ChatGPT is also explaining. But the cool thing here is whatever code that you write here can be quickly analyzed, and you can get the understanding of the functionality of that code by just questioning to the ChatGPT. So the ChatGPT is able to respond it in a very crisp and clear manner, and so that we can able to enjoy the learning with the help of ChatGPT sitting aside of the editor itself. So we don't need to shuttle between the ChatGPT portal and then copying the code and pasting there and then asking please explain me this code. So such questions, such steps are not required, because we have an extension already available within the Visual Studio Code editor, which we can use it effectively in order to make use of this feature, right? So the very first thing is you need to install the Code GPT extension from the Visual Studio Code editor by using the extensions option. Search for it and then install it. Post installation, you have to ensure that you generate an API key with the OpenAI.com, platform.openai.com, and after you generate the key, just go to the extension settings, where you'll have the option to drop the API key that you have copied and pasted, and with that steps you'll be able to have a conversation raised with the ChatGPT via the plugin called Code GPT. So what else we can do here is, it's not just about asking questions on explaining this code, but we can also ask this question. Hey, so let's say I've selected this question. Hi, can you write an alternate logic for this selected code? Okay, so what I'm saying right now here is I'm asking for an alternate logic. So this is one logic that we have written, right, in order to reverse a string. But what I'm saying is, after selecting the code, I'm just asking a question to the Code GPT saying that please help me out in writing a different logic. So if you see here, there is a different logic is written. Okay, you also have the option to copy this. So you have the copy icon there. Just click on that copy, and if you look at it, this is a different logic. So here also we have the function reverse string, but the way it is reversing here is different. So it is using a loop, and with the help of loop, they are doing a reversing logic, and then they are returning the reversed value as well. So this is a single use case of reversing a given string, but for that use case we have multiple logic that can be written or applied in order to get the response. So ChatGPT is helping me all the way to get an alternate method of writing the logic for this use case. So this is one way of logic, but this is also another way of logic which can give the same result. So let's see if that is going to work as reversing a string or not. So I'm just going to remove this function which I've copied. Instead, I'm going to make use of this reverse string logic which was written by Code GPT, the Chat GPT. So what we can do is just go ahead and launch the terminal screen, and from there we'll be able to say node, and the file name is reverse, and okay, so this is reverse string. Just save this file, and enter it. So here you can see it's Malayalam, which is reversed, right? You can see M is in lowercase and here M is in uppercase. So since it is reversed, you can see the first M, which is in uppercase, it exactly got reversed. So I can also write my name and check if that is getting reversed or not. So launch the node again. Yes, of course it got reversed. So the meaning is even this function does the same logic like what we have written earlier, right? But this logic was all the way generated by the code the ChatGPT. But how did we interacted with the ChatGPT is with the help of the Code GPT plugin or an extension that we have installed within the Visual Studio Code editor, right? So you can ask any questions that you wanted sitting from this Code GPT plugin itself. So let's say, can you write an unit test case for the selected code? So I'm just selecting the code and I'm asking it as help me out in writing a test case for it. Of course, it has started to write a test case, right? So a unit test case has been written, and it is also going to give a clear explanation. So this test case consists of two test scenarios, one that tests the main functionality of the reverse string method and one that tests the specific edge case passing an empty string as an input. So what it means is we can have a quicker learning with the ChatGPT side by side while we are writing the code for our application development or for project development. If in case somewhere we are stuck, we need to gain the understanding of the snippet of code that we have written here, then probably we can jump into the ChatGPT and ask the ChatGPT to explain us what this snippet of code is going to do. So let's say, for example, you're integrating with multiple developers and you're pulling the code from the GitHub, and you saw that there is a new functionality being integrated into the existing source code, and that's been written by a different developer, but you are not able to catch up what that code is all about. Then probably just copy or select that particular code. You don't need to copy it, just select the code and go to the Code GPT and use that plugin tool and ask a question. Hey, please explain me the selected code up here, and automatically the ChatGPT can analyze the code that is selected, and quickly it helps us in giving the explanations for it. So then obviously we can make use of the ChatGPT positively used within our development environment. So with this, I'll stop my lecturing. Hope it would have been an informative session. So please comment on the comments section so that I'll help you out if in case you have any queries in integrating or enabling this Code GPT within your Visual Studio Code editor. So thank you all.